screening, let's proceed with antibody identification. So, dun sa antibody screening, di ba, ano lang ba yung mga possible causes or results ng antibody screening? Once kasi yung nag-positive sa antibody screening, we should proceed with antibody identification. So, guys, pinatry ko sa inyo yung antibody panel. So, try lang naman. It's up to you if aaralin nyo na mabuti. Pero again, hindi naman siya lumalabas sa board exam. Okay? So, siguro yung mga key concepts na lang yung kailangan nating tandaan, which is yung i-discuss ko ngayon, mga konti-konti lang naman, hindi naman masyadong importante. Because the most important part here is yung cross-matching natin, yung sa compatibility testing. Okay? So, papasadahan ko lang to. So, antibody identification, once an antibody has been detected, additional testing is necessary to identify, of course, the antibody and determine its clinical significance. So, sabi nga natin, in blood banking, dapat ang mga antibodies should be clinically significant. Yun yung mga dinedetect talaga natin. And the method used should be as sensitive as that used for detection. So reagent cells here are panel cells. Unlike sa antibody screening, we have what we call now your screening cells. Okay, ilan kasi yung screening cells natin? 2 to 3. Here, the reagent cells naman, or what we call panel cells, are 11 to 20 cells. And its composition, same with screening cells. They are group O red blood cells. So ano ba yung mga kailangan or considerations or guidelines for us to interpret the panel? Again, gusto ko lang sabihin sa inyo, yung mga key concepts na lang yung pagtutuunan natin ng pansin. Huwag natin pahirapan yung sarili natin. So number 1, patient history. Okay? The information concerning the patient's age, sex, race, diagnosis, transfusion, pregnancy history, medications, and intravenous solutions may provide valuable clues in antibody identification studies, especially with complex cases. Guys, naririnig niyo ba ako na maayos or maingay? Okay naman?
Maayos
Okay
po,
naman
sir.
po.
Okay lang,
Okay,
sir.
so why do we need to check the history of the patient? Examples, baka daw kasi may anti-D sa mga pregnant patients, recent bacterial infections, viral illness, and transfusion. As we all know, di ba? When our body is triggered with bacterial or viral infections, we can or we may produce an antibody against that. The race, okay, it's either black or Caucasian, 'di ba? Kasi napag-aralan naman natin doon sa sa ABO blood group systems natin, 'di ba? Na some black are antigen negative for this blood group system, some are not. Okay? So let's proceed with autocontrol. Very important yung autocontrol. These determine whether the antibody is an alloantibody or autoantibody. So autocontrol is a suspension of patient's red cells with the patient's serum. Okay, tandaan nyo yung composition. It is included at the end of the panel or antigram indicated as PC patient cells. As guys, dun sa panel na pinagawa ko sa inyo, di ba, nasa last part siya ng column, yung autocontrol. Okay, so notes, ito yung kailangan tandaan. When autocontrol is positive and direct antiglobulin test is negative, potentiator being used may be causing the false positive result. But when autocontrol is positive and that is positive, it indicates the presence of autoantibodies. So tatandaan nyo na dapat pareho si autocontrol and that. Pero dun sa panel na pinakita ko sa inyo, wala namang that testing dun, di ba? Di ba? Wala, hindi ginawa yung that. So ito lang kailangan tandaan. Next, phases of reaction. So it is an indication if an antibody is an IgM or IgG. Na-discuss na din natin to sa first part nung lecture. So immediate spin or room temperature phase called antibodies or immunoglobulin M. 37 degrees Celsius phase may be called IgM if reaction started at room temperature phase, and may be warm IgG if reactions are not seen at room temperature but noticed at anti-human globulin. And on the anti-human globulin phase, they are warm antibodies or IgG, and these are considered clinically significant. Let's proceed. Reaction strength. Okay, it is a clue for the numbers of antibody present. So, single strength. Okay, reaction of cells in only one phase. Na-discuss ko na rin to last time. Ibig sabihin, there is a one antibody specificity. but varying strengths or reaction of cells in different phases. Guys, pa-erase to, different phases, iba-iba, more than one antibody specificity, or a single or one antibody showing dosage. Na-discuss ko na rin yun last time, di ba? So sabi dito, antibodies such as anti-K, anti-D, small c, and big C are commonly stronger than anti-Duffy A, Duffy B, KID A, KID B, anti-big S, and anti-small s. So the strength of the reaction also varies with antigen dosage. So sabi dito, a stronger reaction may be due to dosage. Homozygous cells reacting more strongly than heterozygous cells. So kung mapapansin nyo dito, guys, may tanong ako sa inyo, nung ginawa nyo ba yung panel, naintindihan nyo ba or hindi? Yung dito sa ruling out ng may dosage. Sino na ulit kasi may mga dosage na blood group system natin? RH except D. Sino pa? KID. Lutheran. MNS. Ano pa? Duffy. Tama?
Yes, sir.
Opo, sir.
Okay. Sige. So sabi dito, if a panel is homozygous, a stronger reaction may be noticed. But if a panel is heterozygous, a weaker reaction may be noticed. So here, ito daw yung hindi mo i-rule out. Bakit? To void excluding a weak antibody that is showing a dosage. So kung naaalala ninyo guys, let's try this. Kung naaalala nyo dun sa panel, ganito lang yan. For example, Duffy A, anti-Duffy A, Duffy A, tapos ito, Duffy B. Okay. Anti-Duffy B. Sino for example, antibody na sa taas. Diba antibodies yung nasa taas ng panel? Okay. Paano pag ganitong reaction? Positive, 0, both are positive. Dito naman sa baba. Sino i-rule out mo dito? Sino yung ka-cancel mo dito?
Yung una,
Yung una po, sir.
Rule out? Rule out? Hello? Ulitin ko. Sino yung rule out mo dito? Hello, narinig ko na
Yung
kanina.
una po, sir.
Okay, very good. I-rule out mo yung una
po, sir.
Okay? Yes, very good. Rule out yung una, yung pangalawa, do not rule out. Huwag mong i-rule out. Okay?
Yes, sir.
Okay, tandaan niyo yun na. So, remember this. Next, let's proceed with ruling out or exclusion. So, okay. So, in ruling out or exclusion, so sabi dito, exclude antibodies that could not be responsible for the reactivity seen. Alam niyo yan, di ba? Kina-cancel nyo na kapag wala namang reaction. Ha? Hello? Ano yun? Mute na lang muna lahat. Okay. To do this, the cells that gave a negative reaction in all phases of testing are examined. Yung check mo. The antigens on these negatively reacting cells will probably not be the target of the antibody. Generally, it is advisable to perform this rule-out technique only if the antigen is homozygously expressed on the cell. So negative reactions, if no reaction was observed, the antibody to the antigen on the panel was probably not present. Positive reactions never rule out. Alam niyo yan, di ba? So here are examples of low frequency antigens. Okay. Next, imamatch na natin yung pattern. Look at the reactions that are positive and match the column. So number 1, single antibody. If the specificity is a single antibody, that the patterns matches one of the antigen columns. Multiple antibodies, when more than one antibody is present, it is difficult to match a pattern unless the phases of reaction strength are unique. So ito, babalaan ko lang kayo guys. Huwag kayo matakot, hindi talaga ako maglalabas ng panel sa exam. Buti sana kung face-to-face to kaya ko magbigay. But now, hindi siya possible na magbigay ng panel. Paano nyo gagawin? and all. Pero anyway, at least alam nyo naman. Hindi naman siya lumalabas sa board exam. Sinasabi ko nga sa inyo. Again, gusto ko lang malaman ninyo yung principle or yung mga informations na kailangan or the technique on doing it. Kaya ko pinagawa sa inyo. Para if ever soon, baka may tanong mo lang about the antibody identification, mainly yung sa exclusion, okay, or ruling out, yung sa column natin, sa panel, alam nyo, okay? So, rule of 3, wag na masyado. Patience phenotype, wag na masyado. So, additional techniques for resolving antibody identification used when, okay, nag-a-add lang daw tayo ng techniques. Additional techniques for resolving antibody identification. Ngayon, sobrang dami daw antibodies. Ngayon, dun sa multiple antibodies na yon, hindi pa natin sure kung yun na ba yung antibody. That's why we should add techniques, okay? Ginagamit daw to when patients have more than one antibody or what we call multiple antibodies. So ano yung number 1? Selected cell panels, okay? Ano tong selected cell panels? Ibig sabihin guys, we should select cells. Guys, saan na tayo? Ito yung mga additional techniques para mas ma-resolve pa natin ang antibody identification. Kailan tayo mag-add ng technique when yung sa initial identification natin, sobrang dami ng antibodies. So we can use, first one, selected cell panels or your selected cells. These are cells chosen from another panel to confirm or to eliminate the possibility of an antibody. So the cells selected for testing should have minimal overlap in the antigens they possess. So pwede tayo gumamit ng selected cells. So, yan yung example, okay, ng selected cells. It is also used when a patient has a known antibody and the technologist is attempting to determine if additional antibodies are present. Okay, number 1, selected cell panels. Number 2, enzyme treatment. Okay, pwede naman daw natin gamitan ng enzyme treated or let's treat our cells with enzymes. This is used to eliminate or enhance the antibody activity. Okay, tatanggalin ba natin? Or pwede rin natin i-enhance yung antibody activity for us to detect the specific antibody. So what are enzymes used here? These are ficin, papin, trypsin, bromelain. And these are the commonly used to treat your RBCs. So paano ba yung mode of action? They modify the RBC surface by, of course, removing the sialic acid residues and by denaturing or removing glycoproteins on the surface of your red blood cells. The effect is to, para saan? Sisirain daw niya yung antigens and of course, enhance the expression of others. Okay, and there are 2 procedures kapag ginagawa ang enzyme treatment. Okay, must know, lumalabas sa board exam. One-stage enzyme technique. Pag one-stage enzyme technique, simultaneous incubation of test serum, enzyme, and red cell is performed. Ibig sabihin, sabay-sabay na lahat sa isang testing medium. Okay, pag sasabay-sabayin mo siya. When we say two-stage enzyme technique, makinig. Panel or screening cells are pre-treated with enzymes. Okay, yung mga screening cells or the panel cells are pre-treated with enzymes. Wash and use without other enhancement media in the anti-human globulin test. After enzyme treatment of red cells, these cells are retested with the serum of patient to determine whether the antibody is still reacting. So that's the difference, okay? Because enzyme destroys some antigens, now the exclusion technique cannot be used on the enzyme panel alone. The enzyme panel should be compared with a panel using the same cells untreated. So guys, di ba dun sa pinanood ko sa inyong video, meron tong ganito, example na ganito? Kailangan mo siyang i-compare doon. Hello? I-compare mo siya doon sa cells na untreated.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Oo, ano nyo yun, di ba? Oo.
Yes po.
Yes.
Yun lang yung mga examples. Oo, alam kong feel ko hirap yung iba dyan or di ba, nahihirapan or nangangamba. Alo, hindi ko alam. Again, gusto ko lang malaman nyo yung i-highlight ko lang ng kailangan yung malaman. Eto na, sinasabi ko na sa inyo yung mga kailangan nyo lang malaman. So, wag na kayong pa-stress dyan. Okay? We barely have 1 week. So next, DTP or tritol treatment. It is a reagent that can be used to i-denature yung KEL system natin, your KEL system antigens on red cells. It works by disrupting the tertiary structure of proteins, which makes them unable to bind with specific antibody. So pwede rin daw siyang gamitin in pretreating the patient's red cells in adsorption technique. Number 4, neutralization. Guys, alam niyo ni guys, nabanggit ko na sa inyo neutralization last time, di ba? Paulit-ulit lang to. At alam niyo na rin yung mga sources of substances for neutralization. Right? Okay, so isulat nyo na lang sa anti-P1, Lewis, Schieder-Rogers, anti-SID-A, and anti-I. So example of neutralization of anti-Lewis B. So andito naman yung example. So I want you to read that and understand. Okay, next, ito important, laging lumalabas. Adsorption technique. Okay, let's start. So, ano ba yung basic definition ng adsorption? Anyone? Guys, basic definition of adsorption? Hello?
Adherence to the surface.
No?
Adherence to the surface, sir.
Adherence to the surface. Anong adherence? Anong ginagawa pag adsorption technique? Tinatanggal mo yung Okay.
Antibodies, sir, sa serum.
Yung antibody,
Very
sir.
good. Okay. You directly or you remove. It is ito na lang pala. Sulat nyo, removal of antibody directly in the serum. Okay, nasa serum pa lang yung antibody hindi pa siya naka-attach sa antigen. Again, removal of antibody directly doon sa serum. It is used to remove autoantibodies from serum to determine whether an underlying alloantibody exists. So antibodies may be removed from serum by we add the target antigen and allowing the antibody to bind to the antigen. Similar daw to sa neutralization technique. So in the adsorption method, the antigen-antibody complex is composed of solid precipitates and is removed from the test system by centrifugation. The absorbed or adsorbed serum is tested against the RBC panel. So, ganun lang. So, ano yung mga techniques natin? Your rest or rabbit erythrocyte stroma, okay, it removes cold or IgM antibodies, particularly anti-big I specificities. Anong limitation? It may absorb anti-B and other IgM antibodies. We have also cold autoadsorption. Patients' red cells are used to remove cold autoantibodies to determine if allotransfused antibodies are present. Again, tinatanggal niyo yung cold autoantibodies. Anong limitation? Limitation nito, hindi daw siya pwedeng gamitin if recently transfused within the last 3 months yung patients. Let's proceed. Warm autoadsorption, same. Remove warm autoantibodies, same din yung limitation. We have also differential or allogeneic adsorption. Uses known phenotype red cells to separate specificities. Warm autoantibodies. Isa-separate daw yung warm autoantibodies from alloantibodies and alloantibodies from several specificities. It is used for patients who have been transfused for the last 3 months. Okay? Ginagamit daw siya for patients who have been transfused for the last 3 months. It may absorb a high-frequency alloantibody. That's the limitation. Okay, so we're done with adsorption. Pwede rin naman natin daw gamitin yung DAT and elution technique. Alamin na rin yung DAT. Ginagawa naman ang DAT to detect in vivo sensitization of red cell. Let's proceed. Elution. Ano naman yung elution, guys? Elution. Okay, so
breaking bands po ng antibody at antigen.
Very good. So we break bands of antibody and antigen. So the basic definition, therefore, for this is removal of antibody that is already attached on antigen on the surface of RBC. Okay, tatanggalin mo yung antibody na naka-attach na doon sa antigen sa RBC. Unlike guys, doon sa adsorption technique kasi part Okay? Part nung technique, yung kailangan mo siyang ipa-attach sa antigen na nasa serum para matanggal siya. Okay, that's the difference. Okay? That's the difference of adsorption and elution. So here, elution, this is helpful to identify the specificity of IgG that is attached to red cells when the DAT is positive. Okay, it is used to release, concentrate, and purify antibodies. And to identify the IgG specificity, IgG attached to red cells is dissociated and placed into a solution to test the specificity. And the recovered antibody is what we call now your LU weight. Okay, so what are the different elution methods? Okay, pwede tayong gumamit ng glycine acid which with a pH of 3.0. So, mode of action niya paano? Kasi mababa yung pH, okay? Kaya, remove or there is, i-break niya yung bonds between the antibody and antigen. The benefit, rapid and sensitive, commercially available. So heat, we can use 45 degrees Celsius and 56. Ano meron sa 45? It allows for antibody removal while leaving the RBC intact. While 56 degrees Celsius, okay, it is called your total elution method, allowing for antibody identification. So physical, yung sa heat, ano pa ba? Benefit, rapid, effective for ABO antibodies, and this is inexpensive. So, limitation, not sensitive for other antibodies other than ABO. Okay, gumagamit din tayo ng freeze-thaw technique or what we call now your Louis freeze method or your Louis freeze method also produces total elution and in using this technique, should be frozen at negative 18 degrees Celsius. Next, gumagamit din tayo ng mga chemicals such as ether, methylene chloride, dichloromethane, and chloroform. They act on the lipids in your RBC membrane to reduce surface tension, and it can lead to reversal of the van der Waals forces that hold antigens and antibodies together. And guys, this is more potent elution technique. Okay? Magamit tayo ng organic solvent. This is sensitive and inexpensive. And limitation, this is hazardous, carcinogenic, and flammable because these are chemicals. So we can also do antibody titration, determine the antibody concentration. Okay? All right. Okay, ano muna tayo? Ladder break for 5 minutes. Hello? Hello? Are you guys still there?
Hello, sir.
Yeah.
Hello.
Anyway, kamusta naman kayo? Parang ang tagal natin hindi nag-meet, no? 2 weeks. Hello?
Okay lang po, sir.
Okay.
Con-
sir.
Congratulations to all the winners pala. Yung Tail Mercenaries. Tama ba? The overall champion. And of course, congratulations to College of Allied Health Sciences, Student Government. Wow. Okay. Joanna, congrats. And of course, sa MLS SOC. Yung
Thank you
mga
po,
ganyang
sir.
paandar
Thank you,
pala
sir.
ngayon ng
Thank you, sir.
ng CSU ngayon, no? Ayun. So, medyo pagod lang din ako. Alam ko naman, no, ang daming ginawa. Pagod na kayo? Tuloy to. Wait lang. Baka, kailan yung exam natin? June 4?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir,
Oo.
na-move
Uy,
po.
yung na-recover, yung ano pala, yung quiz nyo na na-delete last time, na-recover na. Okay na yun. Naka-hide lang yun. Nagpatulong ako sa ano nyo eh. Kay sir, basta yung
Yes
sa
po, sir.
okay na siya. Oo, okay na. Okay. Oh, guys, very important, compatibility testing. So parang sa ano lang ito, sa relationship, 'di ba? Dapat compatible kayo para makamit niyo yung goals in life. And magtagal kayo, of course. Parang ano lang 'yan, parang sa compatibility testing in blood banking, 'di ba? Dapat compatible yung packed red blood cells or the blood transfused to the patient. Siyempre magtatagal or the viability of that blood matagal, and successful, 'di ba? It can heal the patient, 'di ba? So sabi nga 'di ba, ang blood transfusion is also called chemotherapy. It is used to treat then. It is a form of treatment. Okay? So let's start. Compatibility testing is also called pre-transfusion testing. Okay, pre-transfusion kasi these are series of tests na kailangan gawin before we transfuse the blood to the recipient. So compatibility testing is considered synonymous with cross-matching. But remember that cross-matching is only a part of compatibility testing. Nakakalito, no? So, parang tandaan natin na ang cross-matching is under the umbrella of compatibility testing. Okay? So, compatibility testing includes recipient identification, sample collection and handling, and required pre-transfusion testing. So basically, the process begins with transfusion requests and ends with the transfusion of blood product to the patient. So, ganun lang yan. Yun yung pag-uusapan natin ngayon. From the transfusion request, at dapat, syempre, successfully matransfuse yung blood product indicated for the patient. So, compatibility testing, sa other books, these are series of procedures designed to ensure the safety of blood transfusion. So what is the purpose of compatibility testing? Number one, for us to select the blood components that will not cause to harm the recipient and will have acceptable survival when transfused. Okay? Number two, ensures the greatest compatibility between the donor and recipient during blood transfusion. So actually guys, sa compatibility testing, tatlong tao lang ang involved dito. Yung magdodonate ng dugo, yung magre-receive ng dugo, at ikaw as a medical laboratory scientist. And syempre, ikaw yung pinaka-importante dito. Okay? Because you will dictate everything. Ikaw magte-test, okay, lahat-lahat, ikaw. So very important to know all of this. So what are the components, okay, of compatibility testing? Number one, ang anim to. So lahat ito guys, pag-uusapan natin. Number one, identification of the patient and donor and collection of appropriate sample for testing. So, doon muna tayo sa number one, okay? Pag-usapan natin, sige, let's read tayo. Number two, ano pa ba? Testing the patient sample and review of past blood bank records. Okay, again, it is important for us to review the history, yung history ng pasyente or ng donor. Number three, we should select or the selection of appropriate blood donor units. Number four, testing of donor sample. Tetestin natin yung sample from the donor. Guys, pa-mute naman muna. Hello, may hindi na-mute eh. Darlene, pa-mute na lang. Ano ba to? Ayun. Number 5, cross-matching. And number 6, of course, re-identification of the patient before infusion of blood. Ay, guys. Tama pala. Akala ko nalampasan ko ni sa mga tiki. Sorry, nalilito lang ako. Okay, let's proceed with number 1. The first component of compatibility testing, identification, collection, and preparation of samples. From saan? Sa pasyente, okay, at sa donor. Okay, but first, pinaka-importante, positive patient identification. So, the major cause kasi of transfusion-associated fatalities is due to clerical error resulting in incorrect ABO groupings. Dapat A, blood type siya, pero nalagay mo AB. That's very wrong. Okay, so clerical error is considered the greatest threat to safe transfusion therapy. And the most common cause of error, of course, misidentification of the recipient. So kailangan guys, positive patient identification. So sa inyo nakasalalay ito. Okay, so to prevent collection of samples from the wrong patient, first, the recipient's wristband identification must always be compared with the requisition form or what we call now your blood request form. So sa Philippines, walang mga wristband. Ang pinaano na lang is yung ID, identification. Ay yung mga tawag dito, valid IDs, okay? So the request form must state the intended recipient's full name, unique hospital identification number. Other informations, kailangan din nakalagay doon yung age, date of birth, address, sex, and name of the requesting physician. So, syempre, yung printing dapat doon sa requisition form must be legible and indelible nameplate impressions or computer printouts are preferable to handwritten forms. So, mas okay kapag printed. In some transfusing facilities, if the patient does not have a wristband and is coherent, it is permissible to ask the patient to state his or her full name and to spell it out. Guys, lahat ng nilagay ko dito importante, so kailangan makinig. If the date of birth or home address is printed on the requisition form, the patient might be asked to state this information. The phlebotomist should never offer a name and ask the patient to confirm that it is correct. So mali yun na. Guys, kayo po ba si Mr. Alvin Gozon? Mali po yun. So dapat you ask the patient. Okay? Hi sir, what's your name? Alvin Gozon po. Ganun. Okay? So never. Tandaan nyo to. And last, if the patient is very young or is incoherent, some other reliable professional individual who knows the patient must confirm the identity and document this on the requisition form. So it's very important yung mga bantay or yung guardian. Kapag yun nga, very young yung pasyente or incoherent, we might ask yung guardian nila or yung sino yung bantay sa hospital. Okay, now, let's collect the patient samples. Okay? Tapos na tayo sa patient identification. Okay, dapat maayos yung patient identification. Next, we collect now. Iko-collect na natin yung sample ng patient. Guys, makinig kayo ha. In order to, kung paano yung flow na ginagawa sa blood bank. Okay? Next, collecting patient samples. So pagkatapos na natin ng positive identification of the patient, okay, blood samples should be drawn using a careful technique to avoid, of course, hemolyzing the sample. In vitro hemolysis kasi of recipient samples for pre-transfusion testing cannot be used. Hindi pwede yon, yung in vitro hemolysis, because it can mask the hemolysis caused by antigen-antibody complexes that activate complement to completion. Alright, so bawal ang hemolyzed samples. Okay, wrong, very wrong. Hindi pwede. Pag hemolyzed na yan, okay, wag i-accept. Next, serum or plasma may be used for pre-transfusion testing. Again, ang i-collect natin dito, it's serum or plasma. Pero ano yung preferred? Serum, okay? Serum is preferred over plasma. Why? Number one, plasma may cause fibrin clots. Okay? And number two, plasma may inactivate the complement. Naalala niyo yan, di ba? Okay.
Yes, sir.
Next, ilang ml daw ng blood ang kailangan? Bilugan. Lahat yan importante. 10 ml of blood ang sufficient for all testing procedures if there are no known serologic problems. So yung 10 ml na blood na yun galing sa patient, okay, or recipient. Guys, huwag kayo malito. Pag sinabi kong patient or recipient, iisa lang sila. Okay? Sila yung magre-receive ng dugo. Okay, sila yung magre-receive or matatransfusion ng dugo. Okay, malilito doon. Again, 10 ml, magic number. Next, let's proceed. To avoid contamination with IV materials. Guys, alam ko na nyo na to, yung mga IV. Alam nyo na yan, di ba? Venous samples are not to be withdrawn from above an infusion site, but are to be drawn from the below site. Sabi dito, if a sample must be taken from an IV line, kasi lahat guys, meron siyang swero, okay? The line should be disconnected for 5 to 10 minutes. The first 10 ml of blood drawn should be discarded. Tandaan nyo yun. And then the sample for testing should be obtained. So again, disconnect for 5 to 10 minutes, draw 10 ml of blood from the patient, discard that, and then collect again, yun yung gagamitin mo. If daw yung sample is taken from a patient na merong swero, both arms, okay? Recipient serum should also be separated from the patient's RBCs as soon as possible after the sample has clotted. If testing cannot be performed immediately, samples should be kept at 1 to 6 degrees Celsius. Okay, naintindihan? Very good. So, tapos na tayo sa collecting now your patient samples or recipient samples. Doon naman tayo sa donor. Donor samples. Samples for donor testing must be collected at the same time as the full donor unit. RBCs for donor pre-transfusion compatibility testing can be prepared from the segmented tubing through which the donor blood was collected. The tubing or segment is attached to the collection bag and each segment is imprinted with the same number. These numbers are different from the donor unit number but nonetheless are a positive means of sampling a given unit of blood. So what do we mean by this? Guys, yung donor samples daw natin, pwede na natin siyang isabay. Pwede na natin siyang, di ba si donor magdodonate ng dugo? Naalala nyo? So ganito kasi itsura niya. So this is the needle. Okay, tapos ito yung tube. Ito yung blood bag. So sabi dito sa statements sa donor samples, guys, samples for donor testing must be collected at the same time as the full donor unit. Anong ibig sabihin nito, guys? Pwede daw tayong kumuha ng segment dito. Okay? Pwede tayong kumuha ng segment dito. Actually, may machine na ginagamit dyan para makakuha ng segment dito. Bakit? Ba't kailangan ng machine? Kasi hindi lang natin ito pwedeng guntingin lang, guys, ha? Kasi pwedeng, pag ginunting natin yan, magpapasok ka ng air doon sa blood bag. Ano mangyayari doon sa cells natin, sa blood natin? Masisira, hindi pwede. So may ginagamit dyan na machine para makuha natin tong segment na to. Tapos itong segment na to, ito na yung donor sample natin. Nagets nyo ba? Hello? Hello?
Yes po.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Okay, very good. Okay, to sum it up, again, in collecting the patient samples or recipient samples, again, syempre, mag-withdraw tayo sa patient or recipient, whole blood yun. So, ang kailangan lang natin, serum or plasma, di ba? So, anong mas preferred? Serum or plasma?
Zero.
Zero
po,
po.
sir.
Okay, very good. Next, sa donor sample, sukulit niya sa segment dun sa blood bag. Okay? Next, note, both donor and recipient samples must be stored for a minimum of 7 days. Again, yung viability lang nung donor and recipient samples or patient samples, okay, viable lang siya for 7 days following transfusion at 1 to 6 degrees Celsius. Okay? Let's proceed. Okay, compatibility testing protocols. Testing of the patient sample. Ngayon, itetest na natin yung sample na nakuha natin sa pasyente. Okay, ano ba yung mga tinetest natin doon sa patient? So, sabi dito, a record must be maintained of all results obtained in testing patient samples. Some large transfusion services keep this information on a computerized retrieval system for ready access. But dito sa Philippines, guys, konti lang ng hospitals yung may ganyan. Yung may computerized retrieval system. Any discrepancies between previous and current results must be resolved before transfusion is initiated. A new sample should be collected from the patient if necessary to resolve the problem. Again, ABO and RH blood typing or grouping must be included in the file. Also, notations concerning unusual serologic reactions and the identity of unexpected antibodies in the patient's serum should be included. So ano ba yung mga itetest natin doon sa patient or recipient sample? Number 1, ABO and RH grouping or blood typing. Kailangan yan. Ano pa? We do antibody screening of the patient's serum. Okay? Sabi dito, antibody screening of the patient's serum can be performed in advance or at the same time as the cross-match. If the patient has had a transfusion or has been pregnant within last 3 months, or if the history is unavailable or uncertain, the sample must be obtained from the patient within 3 days of scheduled transfusion. So ito na nga, ano dyan sa baba, ano yung mga kailangang i-test? ABO blood typing. This is the most critical pre-transfusion serologic test. Sabi pa dito, number 3, if the patient's ABO group cannot be satisfactorily determined, an immediate transfusion is essential. Ano yung kailangang ibigay? Magbigay daw ng group O RH negative POC red blood cells. Next, importante din na i-test natin ang RH grouping or blood typing doon sa patient sample. Next, that should be performed on the patient's RBCs to determine whether uptake of autoantibody or alloantibody is responsible for the positive autocontrol test. So guys, that ginagawa lang siya kapag ang autocontrol daw is positive. Again, dapat pag ang autocontrol positive, dapat positive din ang that. Next, antibody screens. Okay, very important. Ngayon, itetest na natin kung meron bang anong antibody ang meron doon sa serum or plasma ng recipient or ng patient. Antibody screening, the objective is to detect as many as clinically significant unexpected antibodies as possible. Again, kapag positive tayo sa antibody screening, proceed tayo with antibody identification. Nagigets nyo na? Okay. Next, selection of appropriate donor units. Okay, now, we select the appropriate donor units. In almost all cases, the first choice for transfusion is blood and blood components of the patient's own ABO and RH group. And ibig sabihin yan, it should be ABO group specific. So guys, kapag tinanong kayo sa board exam, na si patient daw is blood type A negative. A negative. So ano daw yung first choice for transfusion? Siyempre, yung ABO group specific, kapag nasa choices si A negative, at siyempre si A negative, yung pipiliin mo. Pero pag wala sa choices, sinong pipiliin? Group O, RH, negative. Nagigets na ba ako? Guys. Hello?
Yes, sir.
Nagigets niyo ako?
Yes, po.
Alright. Blood group are not available or some other reason precludes their use. Unit selected must lack any antigen against which the recipient has a clinically significant antibody. So sabi dito, ulitin ko when blood and blood components of the patient's ABO blood group are not available or some other reason precludes their use, unit selected must lack any antigen against which the recipient has a clinically significant antibody, meaning the blood to be transfused na galing sa donor, the transfused recipient, dapat wala daw antigen against doon sa antibody na meron si recipient. That's why very important. It is completely acceptable, however, to use blood and blood components that do not contain of all antigens carried on the patient's own red blood cells. So sabi dito, when a recipient must be given blood of a different ABO group, only PAC RBCs can be given. Tama, di ba? Bakit hindi daw whole blood? Kasi pag whole blood, Whole blood cannot be administered in these situations because incompatible preformed ABO antibodies are present in the whole blood plasma. Nagets ba to, guys? Ulitin ko. When a recipient must be given blood of a different ABO group, receive ng, kunyari, A negative siya, okay? A negative siya, pero wala namang A negative na blood. Okay? Only pack RBCs can be given doon sa patient na yon. Anong pwedeng ibigay? Group O, Rh negative pack RBC, hindi whole blood. Kasi again, pag whole blood, may RBC, may plasma. Uy, may plasma, may antibodies. And yung antibodies na yun can directly affect yung recipient natin. Okay, doon sa antigen niya. Naintindihan ba? For example, Group A whole blood cannot be transfused into Group AB recipient because the plasma of Group A whole blood has anti-B antibodies present. Nagets ba yun?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Very good, di ba? Yung pag si blood type A daw, or Group A whole blood, hindi mo siya pwedeng i-transfuse sa Group AB na recipient. Bakit? Kasi si Group A whole blood, okay, yung plasma kasi ni Group A, merong anti-B antibodies present. Ano naman ngayon kung may anti-B doon sa plasma ng Group A whole blood? It will, mag-a-attach siya doon sa B antigen ng recipient and it can cause hemolysis. Naintindihan? So sabi dito, suggested ABO group selection order for transfusion of RBCs. So tandaan nyo to kung ang recipient, okay, kunyari ikaw recipient ka or ikaw yung patient, blood type AB ka, the first choice should be ABO group specific. Siyempre AB. Second choice A, third choice B, and fourth choice lang ang O. O tandaan nyo yan. Blood type A ka, first choice of course A, second choice is O. Blood type B ka, first choice B, second choice O. And blood type O ka, syempre O lang. Again. When a recipient must be given a blood of different ABO group, only pack RBCs can be given. So, ibig sabihin, dun sa mga second choice, third choice, and fourth choice natin, dapat pack RBC lang, not whole blood. Naintindihan ba? Hello?
Opo, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So, tapos na tayo dito sa selection of appropriate donor units. Let's proceed with testing the donor sample. Again, balik nga tayo. Kapag tinest natin yung patient sample, ano yung mga tinetest natin sa sample ng recipient or patient? ABO blood typing, Rh blood typing, antibody screening. Kapag positive sa antibody screening, proceed with antibody identification for us to identify if there are clinically significant antibodies present sa patient or recipient sample. Bakit? Sige na, bakit? Why? Bakit? Sige nga, kung i-check ko lang kung nagigets yun na ba? Anyone? Doon ka nalaman sa donor. Ba't kailangan natin alamin yung antibody doon sa sample ni recipient? Ha? Hello? Bakit natin kailangan alamin? Anyone? Madali lang guys. Ba't natin kailangan alamin? Kasi dapat yung antibodies na meron si pasyente or recipient, okay, dapat si donor, yung dugo ni donor na itatransfuse kay recipient, antigen negative doon sa antibody na meron siya. Nakikita nyo ba? Dapat walang antigen si donor doon sa antibodies ni recipient. Okay, nagigets ba guys?
Yes po, sir.
Sir.
I don't know. Yes or no?
Yes po,
Yes,
sir.
sir.
Okay, okay. Very good. Enciende, sí, señor. Okay, let's proceed. We now test the donor sample. Okay. Bakit meron ako naka-bullet form dito na collection facility and transfusing facility? Guys, magkaiba kasi yan. Nasa na tayo? Testing. Huwag kayong malito. Nasa na tayo? Testing the donor sample. Okay. May tinatawag tayong collection facility and transfusing facility. Isipin nyo guys, na kapag na-try nyo na ba mag-donate ng dugo, yung very urgent. Kasi ako before, I work sa I work kasi before sa Divine Mercy Wellness Center. And sa Divine Mercy Wellness Center, meron lang kaming blood uh, blood station lang yung tawag doon. Okay? Collection. Doon kinolect yung dugo ni donor. And then, si pasyente or recipient naka-confine sa Divine Mercy. Collection facility, CVMC. Nagigets siya ba? Hoy.
Yes, sir.
Nagigets. Okay. So sabi dito, according to the code, doon muna tayo sa collection facility. According to the Code of Federal Regulations and AABB standards, ABO and RH grouping, including tests for weekly and tests intended to prevent disease transmission, must be performed on a sample of blood taken at the time of collection from the donor. So meaning guys, during, okay, pamute muna guys, pamute, maingay. Okay, during the time na parang si donor nag-donate ng blood, okay, ng blood sa collection facility, kailangan daw i-test agad. Pasulat, number 1, dito sa gilid, sulat nyo na sa gilid, ABO blood typing or grouping. Number 2, RH grouping or blood typing, including tests for weekly or weekly tests. And number 3, we should perform what we call now the serologic test for blood-borne infectious diseases. Okay, bakit daw? Tatlo yung kailangang itest sa number 1, ABO, blood typing. Number 2, RH blood typing, including weekly. And number 3, ano yan? Test intended to prevent disease transmission. Anong tawag doon? These are serologic tests. Okay? Serologic tests for blood-borne infectious diseases. And what are these? O, pasulat. Ano yung mga kailangang i-test? Number 1, hepatitis B virus, HBV. Number 2, hepatitis C virus or your HCV. Number 3, your human immunodeficiency virus or your HIV. Number 4, malaria. And number 5, syphilis. Okay, yun yung mga tinetest pa sa dugo ni donor. HBV, HCV, HIV, malaria, and syphilis. Okay? So testing is performed by the facility collecting the donor unit, and results must be clearly indicated on all product labels appearing on the unit. Nagets ba, guys? Hello? Hello?
Yes, sir.
Okay. For example, na-collect na yung dugo ni donor. Nagawa na rin yung ABO, nalaman na rin yung ABO, RH, and negative daw lahat sa mga different blood-borne infectious diseases. Ngayon, pwede na ba siyang i-transfuse sa pasyente? Yes, pwede na. Ngayon, yung dugo, ipupunta na sa Divine Mercy Wellness Center wherein doon naka-confine yung recipient or pasyente. So, doon na tayo sa transfusing facility. Sa transfusing facility, they are required naman by AABB standards to kailangan ba natin i-test ulit yung ABO, RH, at yung mga different blood-borne infectious diseases? Kailangan ba? Let's see. They are required by AABB standards to confirm. Iko-confirm lang daw natin ang ABO cell grouping on all units and RH typing on units labeled RH negative only. So yun lang yung kailangan nating ulitin. Si Divine Mercy Wellness Center, ang kailangan nilang ulitin, ABO blood typing and RH typing. Kapag ang RH blood type ng patient is negative, dun mo lang uulitin. Pero pag positive, no more. Alright? Naintindihan ba? And repeat weekly testing is not required. So that's the difference between transfusion, collection facility, and transfusion testing. Collection facility and transfusing facility. Naintindihan ba? Hello?
Yes po, sir.
Alright. Next, let's proceed. May tanong ba tayo doon? Hello, do you have any question?
Wala.
None so far po,
Sure
sir.
ka ba?
Yes.
Sure kayo? Okay. May tanong ako, sino yung, kailan next sem, July, di ba? So second sem na yon?
Start of another year, sir.
Yes, sir.
Start of first sem. Magtuturo, bigyan na naman ako ng blood, ng bakte at hima.
Sa next batch po ata, sir.
Oo nga, sa next batch. Sino yung mga yun? Ano ba yung mga yun? Matitigas ang ulo? Hindi na. Parang walang reaction ah. Kasi sos, totoo ba?
Go-bite daw po, sir.
Sino yun?
Si-
Sino? Si? Rupert? Uy, bakit third lang pala kayo sa Quiz B?
Sir
Hinahapan
M.
kayo?
Madami po kasing
Ay, sorry, ba't ako tumawa? Uy, wala akong ibig sabihin doon ha.
Ay, sir,
Rupert,
nahirapan.
bakit
Mahirap
sabihin
lang
na
po
ako?
kasi talaga hema, sir. Wala din po akong ibig sabihin, sir.
Fairness. Same naman tayo dyan. Para clear lang sa lahat,
Yes,
di ba?
sir.
Okay. Sige. Let's proceed. Cross-match testing na tayo. Cross-matching na tayo, guys. So, cross-match testing has traditionally meant the testing of patient serum with the donor RBCs, including an anti-globulin phase or simply an immediate spin phase to confirm ABO compatibility. So guys, this is used to confirm ABO compatibility. The terms compatibility test and cross-match are sometimes used interchangeably. They should be clearly differentiated. Again, on compatibility testing. This is routinely performed only on donor products containing red cells. Again, pina-perform lang to kapag yung blood to be transfused are may red cells, okay, containing red cells. A cross-match must be performed for all red cell transfusions. The exception is situations to bakit ko nasabing bakit sabi ito? Ano ba yung mga donor products natin or yung mga blood na kailangang i-transfuse sa recipient na may red cells? Siyempre, PAC RBC. Okay? Ang granulocyte concentrate, meron bang red blood cells yun? Wala. Diba? So, hindi na natin kailangan i-cross-match. Ang platelet concentrate, kailangan bang i-cross-match? Hindi na din. Pero, kapag yung mga sinabi kong products or mainly yung platelet concentrate na yon, okay, nahaluan or tawag dito, anong English no nung nahaluan na
Contaminate, sir.
Oo, sorry, na-contaminate with red blood cells, kailangan daw i-cross-match. Ilang ml ng red blood cells? to sa platelet concentrate. Mamaya malalaman natin. Nagigets niyo yung point ko? Guys,
Yes, sir.
okay.
Opo, sir.
Ano yung mga purpose ng cross-matching? Number 1, prevent life-threatening or uncomfortable transfusion reactions. Number 2, of course, maximize in vivo survival of transfused red cells. Number 3, double-check for ABO errors. And number 4, another method of detecting antibodies. And there are 2 types of cross-matching. Major and minor. And again, sinabi ko na sa inyo last time, major cross-matching na lang ang ginagawa ngayon and routinely performed in laboratories. Okay, in major cross-match, you will mix the donor cells and recipient serum. As you can see, major cross-match, okay? I-mix mo yung donor cells and recipient serum. While minor cross-match naman, hindi na siya required by EABB since 1976 kasi kabaliktaran nito. I-mix mo yung donor serum with that of recipient cells. Why? Hindi na siya, bakit daw hindi na necessary gamitin ang minor cross-match assignment? Ilalabas ko yan sa quiz niyo next week. Okay? Guys, bakit daw hindi na ginagamit ang minor cross-match? There are 3 reasons. Assignment nyo yan, hanapin nyo sa book para magbasa kayo. Okay, so here, let's proceed. So standards and regulations governing the cross-match. Ano ba yung kailangang tandaan? Yung mga standards and regulations na kailangang i-follow for cross-matching. Number 1, the AABB and the FDA are the 2 principal organizations applying standards to the blood banking and transfusion service communities in the United States of America. So, according to FDA, the FDA is the governing body for blood bank inspections every year. The College of American Pathologists and the Joint Commission also inspect blood establishments. And according to AABB standards, okay, AABB standards requires that a cross-match procedure always be performed using the recipient serum or plasma and the donor cells na kinuha daw doon sa segment na originally attached to the blood product bag. Okay? Exception. Di daw to ginagawa in urgent or emergency situation in which blood may be released for transfusion before cross-match. So number 2, the cross-match is defined by the AABB standards that it is a technique that shall use methods that demonstrate ABO incompatibility and clinically significant antibodies to red cell antigens and shall include an antiglobulin test. So exception to the rule na naman, if there are no clinically significant antibodies detected in the current sample or in the patient's past records, an immediate spin cross-match is permitted to fulfill the requirement of detecting ABO incompatibility. Computer cross-match is an alternative for all the requirements. So ano ba itong mga computer serologic cross-match na to? So ito kasi guys, yung cross-match procedures. And there are 2 types of cross-match procedures, serologic and computer. Again, serologic lang ang ginagawa sa Pilipinas. Hindi na tayo walang computer cross-matching here in the Philippines. But we still need to study. So here, serologic cross-match. So originally, the serologic cross-match preceded antibody screening as part of pre-transfusion compatibility testing to check unexpected allo-antibodies. So, what then? Ano ba yung value kung bakit natin kailangang i-perform ang serologic cross-matching between the patient and donor samples? There are 2 main functions of serologic cross-match tests that can be cited. Number 1, the final check of ABO compatibility between the donor and patient. Number 2, it may detect the presence of an antibody in the patient's serum that will react with the antigens on the donor RPCs, but that was not detected in antibody screening because the corresponding antigen was lacking from the screening cells. And cross-matching daw will not guarantee the normal survival of red blood cells, prevent patient from developing an antibody can not detect all antibodies and prevent delayed transfusion reactions. So the current AABB standard states that tests to detect ABO incompatibility are sufficient if there are no clinically significant antibodies detected in antibody screening, no historical record exists of the detection of clinically significant unexpected antibodies. So the serologic cross-match procedure test the recipient serum or plasma with RBCs from the donor unit in an immediate spin cross-match and antiglobulin cross-match. So alam naman natin na serologic cross-match can be performed in any methods, tube, solid, and gel. So this discussion illustrates more on tube testing. So tube lang yung pinag-uusapan natin dito. So guys, ito na nga. Dalawa lang yung binigyang pansin ko dito, yung immediate spin and antiglobulin cross-match. Diba naalala nyo guys, last time, ano yung mga phases natin? Immediate spin or room temperature phase, 37 degrees Celsius phase, and anti-human globulin phase. Naalala nyo ba? Hello?
Yes, sir.
Yes, po.
Okay. Ito lang yung i-discuss ko ngayon. Okay? May immediate spin cross-match and antiglobulin cross-match. Guys, tingnan nyo yung difference nila. Ang immediate spin cross-match, okay? Immediate spin cross-match, ginagawa lang daw to kapag, okay, there is no clinically significant unexpected antibodies detected in the current sample and there are no previous record of such antibodies. Mixing the recipient serum with donor RBCs and centrifuging immediately, that's what you call immediate spin phase. Notes, however, the immediate spin does not detect all ABO incompatibilities. False reactions daw, pwede daw makita sa immediate spin cross-match if meron daw auto-anti-I in patients with hyperimmune ABO antibodies, may RELU formation, and infant specimens are tested. And sabi pa dito, adding EDCA to the test system has been reported to eliminate some of the false positive reaction and also thus improving the sensitivity of the immediate spin cross-match. Okay. So sa immediate spin cross-match natin, ito lang yung gagawin mo. Hindi ka na magpo-proceed sa 37 degrees Celsius and anti-human globulin phase. Again, kaya tinawag na immediate spin cross-match. Kailan daw siya ginagawa? Kapag walang clinically significant unexpected antibodies detected. Kailan naman ginagawa ang antiglobulin cross-match? Done when there is evidence of clinically significant unexpected antibodies in the current sample and historical record of the patient. Kapag merong antibody yung patient. Again, sa antiglobulin cross-match natin, it begins in the same manner as the immediate spin cross-match, continues to 37 degrees Celsius and finishes with antiglobulin test. So again guys, pag sinabi kong antiglobulin cross-match, magi-start pa rin yan sa immediate spin or room temperature phase. Susunod si 37 degrees Celsius phase hanggang matapos si antiglobulin phase. But in the immediate spin or room temperature phase, hanggang dun lang. Hindi ka na magproproceed sa 37 and anti-human globulin phase. Naintindihan ba yon? Hello? Hello? Guys? Are you still there?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So, interpretation of results for cross-matching in tube testing. Guys, sa tube tayo Okay. Appearance, there is no agglutination or hemolysis, meaning compatible. Pwedeng i-transfuse yung dugo. There is an agglutination or hemolysis sa cross-match natin, incompatible. So, ano ba yung mga incompatible cross-matches? Example, sa antibody screen, it is positive. Pero sa cross-match negative, anong cause? The antibody is directed against antigen on screening cell. Resolution, mag-proceed ka na ngayon sa antibody identification para malaman mo kung ano yung antibody. Nagigets ba? Next, kapag ang antibody screen is negative and the cross-match is positive, the antibody is directed against antigen on donor cell, which may not be on screening cell. or donor unit may have IgG previously attached. Anong resolution? Pwede ka na mag-proceed sa antibody identification, select antigen negative blood, or you can perform direct antiglobulin test. Pero kapag positive daw, both antibody screening and cross-match, antibodies directed against both screening cell and donor cells. Antibody identification and select antigen negative blood. So sabi dito, may notes ako dyan, donor and recipient samples, pa-add, donor and recipient samples must be stored for a minimum of how many days again following transfusion? 7 days. The sample should be stoppered and refrigerated at anong temperature? 1 to 6 Celsius. Okay, it should be carefully labeled and adequate in volume so that they can be re-evaluated if the patient experiences an adverse response to the transfusion. So ano naman ang computer cross-match? So very short lang to. Computer cross-match, it uses a computer daw to make final check of ABO compatibility. Baba agad tayo. The ABB standard specifies that the computer cross-match can be used only for the purpose of detecting an ABO incompatibility between the donor unit and the sample that was submitted for pre-transfusion testing. Okay, current sample should be negative for unexpected antibodies, no history of such antibodies. Also, at least 2 concordant patient, ABO or RH type, must be on file. So yun yung computer cross-match, not that important. Okay? So ano ba to? Itong table na to. Okay? Pag-aralan natin. Ito lang yung flow guys para mas maintindihan natin. Alam ko nalilito na kayo kasi ang dami-dami ko pinagsasabi. Wait lang. Para patapos naman na tayo. So, meron daw tayong type and screen request. Anong ibig sabihin ng type and screen request? May blood typing request and antibody screening request. So, ang ginawa, dinetermine daw natin yung ABO and RH phenotype or yung blood type ng patient. Next, sa antibody screening, ang result, there are no clinically significant antibodies and the history of patient, negative naman daw siya for clinically significant antibodies. So anong next na gagawin? Antibody screen is negative. History of patient is negative. Proceed tayo sa cross-match. Anong cross-matching? Immediate spin cross-match. Naalala nyo guys? 'Di ba? Ginagawa lang siya kapag walang antibodies na na-detect. Right? Hello?
Opo, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay, next. Paano naman dito? Okay, ABO and RH phenotype determined. Next, antibody screen result. No clinically significant antibodies. History of patient, negative daw for clinically significant antibodies. But there are 2 ABO determinations validated system. Anong cross-match ang gagawin? Sinabi ko yan kanina. Computer cross-match ang gagawin. Kasi sabi dito sa last part, tingnan yung ano yun nakalagay dyan. Also, at least 2 concordant patient ABO or RH types must be on the file. Doon lang tayo mag-computer cross-match. Actually, hindi ko rin siya mag-gets masyado. Sa Amerika lang yung ginagawa. Yung part na yun. So, yun na lang yung kailangan tandaan na. Huwag yun ang anuhin yung utak ninyo. Next, last part. ABO or RH phenotype is determined. Antibody screen, positive. History of patient, positive. Anong next na gagawin mo? Positive daw sa antibody screening. Uy, may antibodies. We should identify the antibody. And lastly, we perform antiglobulin cross-match. Again, sa antiglobulin cross-match, saan ka mag-start? Immediate spin phase. Sunod si 37 degrees Celsius phase. And sunod si last antiglobulin phase. That's your antiglobulin cross-match. Complete cross-match on units that are antigen negative for prior and new allo antibodies. Okay? So, nabanggit ko kanina, Guys, kailan lang natin ginagawa ang cross-matching? Kapag may nahaluan ito ng red blood cells or kapag ang unit is with red blood cells. So cross-matching for platelets and plasma. Kailangan pa ba? No more compatibility testing is required. Okay? Hindi na kailangan. Guys, para mas maintindihan ninyo, ang tawag kasi dun sa blood product kapag platelet, okay, tawag dun platelet concentrate. Okay? Platelet concentrate. Pasulat. Platelet concentrate. Pero, ang tawag naman kapag yung concentrate. Okay, kapag yung blood product naman natin, mostly plasma, ang tawag dyan, FFP or what we call now your fresh frozen plasma. Naintindihan? Yan yung tinatawag natin. Kapag RBC naman, mostly RBC, ang tawag dun, packed red blood cell. O tatlo na yung alam ninyo ha. Pag mostly yung idodonate na dugo sa pasyente ni donor, puro RBC, pack RBC yon. Tapos platelet, tawag doon platelet concentrate. Tapos puro plasma, fresh frozen plasma. Naintindihan? Again, cross-matching for platelets and plasma. There is no compatibility testing required. Okay? So, for fresh frozen plasma, okay, for fresh frozen plasma, no need for compatibility testing. ABO matching daw. Yun lang. Dapat ABO specific. ABO matching is the only required. For platelet concentrate and cryoprecipitate, no need for compatibility testing and ABO and RH matching is required. Tandaan, ABO and RH for platelet and cryoprecipitate. Guys, ang cryoprecipitate kasi natin, ito yung tinatawag din nating factor 8 concentrate. Factor 8 cryo. Okay, cryoprecipitate. Next, exceptions. Neonates and alloimmunized patients, preferably, they should be ABO, RH matched platelets. And sabi dito, if fresh frozen plasma, platelet concentrate, and cryoprecipitate is contaminated with, guys, recall question ngayon lang, recently sa board exam, contaminated with more than 2 ml of RBCs, do compatibility testing. Again, take note of the magical number. So, compatibilities, last na tayo. Malapit na tayo matapos, guys. Tunting tiis na lang. So, last na tayo. Compatibility testing in special circumstances. In emergencies. Guys, sa emergency, ang kailangan lang daw ibigay, ano sa tingin ninyo? Ito lang yung kailangan tandaan, no? Give group O RH negative RBC. Yan lang naman eh. In case of emergency, salpak agad ng group O RH negative RBC. Okay? Next, transfusion of non-group specific blood. Kapag hindi daw siya ABO group specific blood, when donor units of an ABO group or other than the recipient's own type have been transfused, such as giving a Group A recipient large volumes of Group O donor RBCs, testing the recipient's serum in a freshly drawn sample for the presence of unexpected anti-A and or anti-B must be performed prior to giving any additional RBC transfusions. So, intrauterine transfusions and neonatal transfusion. Guys, alam na banggit ko na to last time, di ba? So, ayan. Selecting blood for exchange transfusion. Sige, discuss muna natin. So, intrauterine transfusions. Blood for intrauterine transfusion must be compatible with maternal antibodies capable of crossing the placenta. So, sabi dito, kapag ang ABO and RH group ng fetus have been determined following amniocentesis, CVS, and PUBS, give group-specific blood. But if the ABO and RH group of the fetus hindi natin nalaman, give group O RH negative RBC. Yun lang yun. Neonatal transfusion naman, less than 4 months old. Only ABO and RH typing. Again, alam natin yan, no serum or backward typing. Alright? So ano pang kailangan? Selecting blood for exchange transfusion in neonates. So, wait lang. Group of neonate, pag baby daw, kapag ang baby may RH-HDN, ORH positive, anong kailangang ibigay na dugo? Sige nga. Anyone? Guys? Hello? Anybody home? Hello? Hello, guys? Sino yun? Si ano? Si...
Sir, hindi ko po alam. Sorry.
Hindi naman kita nilawag ah. Okay, sige. Sulat nyo. Okay, kapag ang baby may RH-HDN tapos ORH positive, okay, yung blood type niya, kailangang ibigay, syempre, ano, O, RH negative. Si ABO naman, it should be ORH positive. Sige nga, assignment nyo. Hanapin nyo nga to sa book ninyo kung ano yung sagot dito. Okay? Next, transfusion in IHA. Hindi masyado importante. Massive transfusion. Tuloy-tuloy. Ayan. Dangerous group O donor. Matching. Okay. Balik tayo. So, di masyado important yung IHA. So, massive transfusion. Kailan to? When the amount of blood or packed cell components infused within 24 hours approaches or exceeds the patient's total blood volume, the compatibility testing procedure may be shortened or eliminated at the discretion of the transfusion service physician following written policy guidelines. Not that important. So sabi dito, specimens naman daw na may prolonged clotting. Mahirap, okay, mahirap itest tong mga specimen na to. Okay, there is maybe a coagulation abnormality associated with a disease or medication. So complete coagulation of the samples can be often accelerated by addition of thrombin. 1 drop of thrombin or 50 units per ml, you mix it with 1 ml of plasma. A small amount of protamine sulfate can be added to counteract the effect of heparin in samples of blood collected from patients on this anticoagulant. And I have here a special topic, dangerous group O donors. Ano to? So in emergency situations, group O donor blood is used as a universal donor, di ba? Where group identical blood is not available. This is already an outdated concept in major blood banks, guys. Kasi may tinatawag tayong dangerous group O donor. Bakit? Meron kasi silang ABO antibodies such as anti-A and anti-B which are hemolysins. May titer sila more than 32 and such donors are called dangerous O donors. Therefore, if group O blood is to be used as universal donor, it should always be plasma depleted. Meaning guys, dapat yung itatransfuse na group O pack RBC, tanggalan ng plasma. Okay? Magtira lang ng red blood cells. Tanggalin yung plasma, puro pack RBC lang dapat. Yun yung ibig sabihin. Naintindihan ba yun? Hello?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Alright. Next, what are the different problems encountered in grouping and cross-matching? Alam niyo na to, Relu formation. Alam niyo na yan, paulit-ulit. Causes, diseases, multiple myeloma, Waldenstrom's macroglobulinemia, and hyperviscosity syndrome. And ano yung mga synthetic plasma expanders na ginagamit natin? Kaya nagkakaroon ng Relu formation. These are dextran,
Dextran.
intravenous X-ray, yung mga materials, and hydroxyethyl starch, di ba? And of course, fibrinogen. We have also here pan-agglutination, spontaneous clumping of cells against a given syrup. Ano yung causes? Causes, bacteriogenic pan-agglutination called. Tawag dyan is your Hubener, Thomson, and Friedrich phenomenon. Sulat ko. Hubener, Thomson, and Friedrich phenomenon. Ayan, okay? That's what you call your bacteriogenic pan-agglutination. Okay? Reaction takes place at 27 degrees Celsius and not at 37. Okay, so polyagglutination naman, condition wherein RBC agglutinates with ABO compatible blood due to altered membrane component. Okay, may problem daw dun sa membrane ng RBC. Example, acquired polyagglutination microbially associated. Ang tawag dyan, T-polyagglutination. This is due to cryptic antigen under N-acetylmuraminic acid. And yung mga organisms kasi na may neuraminidase, kaya nagkakaroon ng T-polyagglutination are Vibrio cholerae, or pneumococci, or Staphylococcus pneumoniae, Escherichia coli, Clostridium, and your influenza virus. TK polyagglutination, anong meron naman na enzyme sila, beta endogalactosidase, and these are Bacteroides fragilis, Serratia marcescens, and Candida albicans. And yung may acquired B phenomenon, alam niyo na yan, organism na merong deacetylase. These are E. coli O86, P. vulgaris 0S19, and Clostridium tertium. And what are other polyagglutination, TH, TX, and DA, non-microbially associated, or TN polyagglutination, or what you call now your acquired A phenomenon. Inherited naman na polyagglutination or are CAD or causal autosomal dominance, hemoglobin M Hyde Park, HEMPAS CD82, nor associated with P1 antigens. And here are the different reactions of your polyagglutination. Tinest natin siya with different panel of lectins such as Arachis hypogaea, Salvia sclerea, Salvia horminum, and Lysine soha. And what are others? Called agglutinins, Wharton's jelly, made up of albumin, prozone effect, antigen, antibody deterioration. So other notes, ABO compatibility for whole blood, red blood cells, and plasma transfusion. Na-discuss ko na rin yan, di ba? Kapag ang recipient natin, sige, discuss ko. Kapag ang recipient or yung patient, may blood type na blood type A, whole blood, kunyari, whole blood ang itatransfuse sa kay recipient, anong blood type ang kailangang ibigay?
A.
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 Ito, blood type B si recipient, whole blood ang ibibigay na dugo ni donor.
B.
B.
B, sir.
Next, whole blood, ang recipient is AB. Whole blood.
B. AB, sir.
AB
sir.
din, guys, tandaan nyo. ABO group specific, okay? And last is O.
O.
Okay, next naman natin, para wag tayo malito. Donor, sige nga, donor. Pag si donor natin, okay, red blood cell ang ibibigay, okay? Ngayon, ang idodonate naman ni donor is RBC. Okay, si recipient, blood type A, anong kailangang ibigay? First choice.
A.
A, sir.
A. Second choice.
O.
O,
sir.
O. Next, blood type B. First
B,
choice.
sir.
B, sir.
B.
Second choice,
O,
O. Blood
sir.
type AB. Blood type AB. First choice, AB.
AB,
Second
sir.
choice,
A.
B.
A.
And then O.
B.
Very good. And last, first choice,
O.
O lang. Next, kapag plasma naman, sige nga, plasma. Si donor, ang idodonate niya plasma, fresh frozen plasma. Blood type A si recipient. A. Or first choice, A. Second choice, AB.
AB.
Di ba na-discuss ko na sa inyo to before? Next, B. B, AB. Next, AB naman si recipient, AB plasma, and then O, first choice O, next is A, next is B, next is AB. Okay? Hello?
Yes, sir.
Alright. Naintindihan ba yon, guys? Hello?
Yes po.
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
sir.
Yes po, sir.
We're done. Tapos na tayo. So next week ulit, guys, for our tawag dito, for our next topic. Ano yung next topic natin, guys? Dun sa template natin.
Donor screening, phlebotomy, special blood collection, sir.
Ayan. O, malapit na tayo matapos dyan. Donor screening. Tapos after nyan, tuloy-tuloy na yan. Okay? So, ayun. Tapos na tayo, guys. May mga tanong ba tayo? May questions ba? Hello? Hello?
Wala po, sir.
Wala na. Okay. Sige. Ang tawag dito. Sige, dress na kayo. Oh. Yes. Hello. Ano yun? May tanong pala. Hello, sir. Paano po i-explain pag magdodonate ang isang tao? Libre po. Pero pag bibigyan ng dugo, may bayad po. Okay. Libre siya. Libre ang donation. Pero guys, yung screening, yun yung sinasabi ko sa inyo, yung ADO blood testing, yung RH typing, pati yung screening for different bloodborne infectious diseases, yun yung, yun yung, tawag dito, yun yung may bayad. Okay na? Guys, sige na.
Thank you po,
Thank
sir.
you, sir.
Thank you,
sir.
Okay.
Thank
you, sir.
Bye-bye.
Bye, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Bye-bye.
Pahinga ka na.
Thank you,
Bye,
sir.
sir.
Thank you, sir.
Bye.
Thank you, sir.